Sometimes the smallest purchase carries the greatest price. Emily Brooks held the single-dollar bill between her fingers a little longer than most people would have. The paper was worn at the corners, folded twice, and softened by years of changing hands. For anyone else, it was almost nothing. For her, it was everything she had left until payday. Outside, a light spring rain painted silver reflections across the parking lot of the neighborhood convenience store in Columbus, Ohio. She pulled her faded blue sweater a little tighter, whispered a quiet promise that tomorrow would somehow be better, and stepped through the automatic glass doors. Warm air carrying the scent of fresh coffee and baked pastries wrapped around her as cheerful music drifted softly from overhead speakers. Emily smiled politely at the cashier before walking toward the lottery terminal. She was not chasing wealth. She was chasing one last reason to believe that life could still surprise her. Earlier that afternoon, she had paid the electric bill, bought groceries with carefully counted coupons, and tucked a homemade lunch into her young son's backpack before sending him to school with the brightest smile she could manage. The dollar remaining in her wallet had almost become bus fare for the following morning. Instead, after standing outside in the rain for nearly 5 minutes, she had listened to a quiet feeling she could not explain. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe there was no difference anymore. "One scratch ticket, please," she said gently. The cashier nodded, accepted the dollar, and pressed several buttons on the lottery machine. A faint mechanical sound followed before a fresh ticket slowly emerged. Emily reached toward it with cautious hands. At that exact moment, another hand appeared beside hers, stopping only inches away from the counter. "Excuse me," a calm male voice said. "That is mine." Time seemed to pause. Emily slowly turned around. Standing behind her was a tall man wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit beneath a dark overcoat still dotted with tiny raindrops. His posture was relaxed. His expression showed neither anger nor arrogance. His steady blue eyes simply rested on the ticket with quiet certainty. Emily instinctively pulled her hand back. "I am sorry," she answered. "I already paid for it." The cashier looked from Emily to the stranger, then back to the register. Confusion replaced the friendly smile that had greeted every customer all evening. Two shoppers waiting near the refrigerated drinks glanced toward the counter, sensing that something unusual had just happened. The stranger reached into his coat pocket and quietly unfolded a $1 bill. "I asked for a scratch ticket before I answered my phone," he explained evenly. "I placed my dollar on the counter, stepped aside for less than 10 seconds, and when I came back, the ticket was gone." Emily looked down at the bill still resting inside the cash register drawer. Her heartbeat quickened. She knew exactly where her own dollar had come from. She had carried it all day inside her wallet, folded beside a photograph of her son. She had handed it directly to the cashier. She had watched the machine print the ticket. None of it made sense. "I did not take anything that belongs to someone else," she said quietly, meeting the stranger's eyes without fear. Instead of arguing, the man studied her face for a long moment. There was no panic in her voice, no greed in her expression, only quiet honesty mixed with uncertainty. He slowly nodded, almost to himself. "Then one of us is missing part of the story," he replied. Neither of them noticed the tiny security camera mounted above the lottery machine, recording every second as rain continued tapping softly against the windows, while a single scratch ticket rested untouched between two strangers whose lives had just become connected by one ordinary dollar. Emily Brooks lowered her eyes toward the small paper ticket resting on the counter, almost afraid to touch it again. The entire store had fallen strangely quiet, as if even the humming refrigerators were waiting for someone to explain what had just happened. The cashier cleared his throat and looked from Emily to the well-dressed stranger before opening the register again. He carefully lifted the folded $1 bill that Emily had handed him only moments earlier. "I remember taking your dollar," he admitted, looking at Emily first. "But I also remember this gentleman asking for a ticket before his phone rang." Nathan Carter nodded without interrupting. He did not step closer. He did not raise his voice. Instead, he glanced toward the lottery terminal, then toward the security camera mounted above it. "There is no reason for either of us to accuse the other," he said calmly. "The camera probably remembers better than we do." Emily studied him carefully. She had expected impatience from someone dressed in an expensive tailored suit. Instead, she saw remarkable restraint. His expression remained composed, almost thoughtful, as though discovering the truth mattered far more than winning an argument. One of the customers near the coffee station quietly walked closer. "Why not just scratch the ticket and split whatever is inside?" he suggested with a friendly smile. Emily shook her head almost immediately. "I cannot accept money that might belong to someone else." Nathan looked at her with quiet curiosity. "Even if it turns out to be a winning ticket?" Emily answered without hesitation. "Especially then." Those two words lingered in the air longer than anyone expected. The cashier slowly nodded, visibly impressed. "Most people would not say that." Emily offered a small smile. "My son is watching everything I become, even when he is not standing beside me." Nathan noticed the photograph sticking slightly out of her worn wallet as she slipped it back into her purse. A young boy smiled brightly from the picture. The edges were bent from years of being carried everywhere. For just a moment, Nathan remembered a photograph his own mother used to keep inside her purse before she passed away many years earlier. The memory arrived unexpectedly and disappeared just as quickly, leaving behind an unfamiliar feeling he had not experienced during countless business meetings or boardroom negotiations. The cashier finally spoke again. "I can call the state lottery office, but they will probably tell us to review the security footage first." Nathan agreed with a quiet nod. "That sounds reasonable." Emily looked toward the rain. Outside the windows, she was already thinking about the bus schedule, the dinner waiting to be prepared, and the little boy expecting her at home. Time was becoming more valuable than money. She took a slow breath before gently sliding the untouched ticket back across the counter toward the cashier. "Please keep it here until the footage is reviewed," she said. "If it belongs to him, I hope he enjoys every dollar. If it belongs to me, it will still be here tomorrow." The cashier stared at her in disbelief. Nathan did the same. Neither of them had expected her to walk away from even the possibility of a life-changing prize. She picked up her small purse, thanked the cashier for his patience, and started toward the exit. Just before she reached the automatic doors, Nathan spoke again, his voice carrying no command, only genuine respect. "Miss Brooks." Emily turned, surprised that he somehow knew her last name from the debit receipt lying beside the register. Nathan met her eyes with the faintest smile. "No matter what the camera shows tomorrow, I hope we meet again under better circumstances." Emily smiled politely before stepping into the gentle rain, never noticing that Nathan remained standing exactly where she had left him, watching the door close with the unmistakable feeling that the most valuable thing inside that store had never been the scratch ticket at all. The next morning arrived wrapped in pale sunlight that slowly erased the memory of the previous evening's rain. But neither Emily Brooks nor Nathan Carter had forgotten the unfinished conversation inside the convenience store. Emily woke before sunrise, quietly preparing scrambled eggs and toast while her young son finished a spelling assignment at the tiny kitchen table. She smiled as he proudly read each word aloud, hiding the uncertainty that had followed her home the night before. Before leaving for school, he hugged her tightly and whispered, "You always tell me that honest people sleep better." Emily kissed the top of his head and answered softly, "And they wake up with fewer regrets." After walking him to the school bus, she headed toward her part-time job at a neighborhood bookstore, believing the strange encounter would probably end with a simple explanation. Across the city, Nathan sat inside the rear seat of a quiet black sedan on his way to the headquarters of Carter Holdings. His assistant reviewed meeting schedules, investment reports, and acquisition proposals, but Nathan barely heard a word. His thoughts kept returning to the calm woman who had willingly walked away from what might have been a fortune. After years of negotiating billion-dollar contracts, he had learned to recognize ambition almost instantly. Yet what he had seen inside that convenience store was something different. It was integrity without an audience. Shortly before noon, Nathan excused himself from a board meeting and drove back to the convenience store alone. The cashier recognized him immediately and offered a respectful greeting before inviting him into the small office behind the counter. The store manager had already reviewed the security recordings several times, but wanted another witness before reaching any conclusion. Nathan watched the black and white footage without speaking. The recording showed him placing a folded $1 bill on the counter before answering an unexpected telephone call. While he stepped only a few feet away, another customer purchased coffee, causing the cashier to move the loose dollar aside so it would not fall onto the floor. Seconds later, Emily approached, removed a folded $1 bill from her own wallet, handed it directly to the cashier, and requested a scratch ticket. The cashier accepted her bill, placed it into the register, then absent-mindedly reached toward the lottery machine without realizing he had already started Nathan's transaction only moments earlier. The printed ticket emerged exactly as Emily extended her hand. The manager paused the video and slowly exhaled. Neither customer did anything wrong, he admitted. The mistake was ours. Nathan nodded quietly. He had expected relief, but what he felt instead was admiration. Emily had never attempted to defend herself by attacking anyone else. She had simply trusted the truth to reveal itself. The manager carefully removed the untouched ticket from the store safe and placed it on the desk beside the printed incident report. Legally, we will have to contact the state lottery office before releasing it, he explained. The transaction record needs to be corrected first. Nathan thanked him and stood to leave. Before reaching the door, he stopped and asked one final question. Did the woman mention where she works? The cashier smiled. She said she was heading to a bookstore a few blocks away. Nathan looked through the office window toward the afternoon sunlight stretching across the parking lot. The ticket no longer interested him nearly as much as the person who had chosen honesty when nobody would have blamed her for choosing otherwise. For the first time in many years, a business decision could wait, because there was another investment he suddenly believed was worth making. Late that afternoon, the state lottery office returned the convenience store manager's call with instructions that surprised everyone involved. Because the ticket had never been scratched and the surveillance footage clearly documented the sequence of events, ownership could only be resolved after both customers appeared together to sign a formal correction report. The manager immediately telephoned the bookstore where Emily Brooks worked part-time. She listened quietly as he explained the review, thanked him for calling, and promised to stop by after her shift ended. She sounded relieved, not excited. Winning had never become her expectation. Knowing the truth had become enough. An hour later, Nathan Carter arrived at the store once again, this time without his driver or his assistant. He preferred to handle this matter himself. When Emily walked through the glass doors carrying a canvas tote filled with library books she planned to return on her way home, she paused for a moment after seeing him already waiting beside the counter. He greeted her with the same calm expression she remembered from the night before. "I believe the mystery is finally over," he said with a gentle smile. The manager invited both of them into the small office and replayed the security recording one final time. Every second confirmed the same conclusion. Nathan had indeed requested the ticket first, but the cashier had accepted Emily's separate $1 bill before accidentally completing Nathan's unfinished transaction. Neither customer had acted dishonestly. Neither customer had attempted to deceive anyone. It had simply been an uncommon chain of ordinary human mistakes. The manager placed the untouched ticket carefully on the desk between them. Legally, Mr. Carter requested this ticket first, he explained. However, Mrs. Brooks paid separately before the machine completed the transaction. We sincerely apologize for creating this confusion. Emily looked at the ticket for several quiet seconds before gently sliding it toward Nathan. Then it belongs to you, she said. I never wanted something that was not mine. Nathan looked down at the ticket but did not reach for it. Instead, he looked directly at Emily. You could have argued that you paid for it, he replied. Most people would have. Emily smiled softly. Maybe, but I would still know the truth every time I looked at it. The room became silent again. Even the manager lowered his eyes, recognizing that the conversation had become about far more than a lottery ticket. Nathan finally picked up the ticket, studied it for a brief moment, then placed it back on the desk exactly where it had been. I requested it first, he admitted. But your honesty has made it impossible for me to think about this as a prize anymore. Emily frowned slightly, unsure what he meant. Nathan folded his hands calmly. Please scratch it, he said. Emily immediately shook her head. I cannot. Why not, he asked. Because if I accept after saying it belongs to you, then my words lose their value. Nathan smiled, not because she had agreed with him, but because she had remained consistent even when nobody would have questioned a different decision. At that moment, he realized that integrity was not something Emily displayed only when people were watching. It guided every choice she made. As they prepared to leave, Nathan reached into his jacket pocket and removed a simple business card. He handed it to her without pressure or expectation. If you ever decide you would like a different Opportunity, he said quietly. Call the number on this card. It has nothing to do with this ticket. It has everything to do with the person I met because of it. Emily accepted the card politely, thanked him, and slipped it into her purse beside the small photograph of her son, never imagining that the thin piece of cardstock would soon open a door neither of them had expected to find. Emily Brooks did not look at Nathan Carter's business card again until 3 days later. It remained tucked safely inside her purse beside the small photograph of her son, untouched while life continued exactly as it always had. She opened the bookstore every morning, helped customers find novels, organized children's shelves, and quietly counted every dollar before paying bills. The strange encounter at the convenience store gradually became a memory she believed would fade with time. Yet every evening, as she emptied her purse onto the kitchen table, the simple white card caught her attention before she carefully placed it back again. One Saturday morning, her son looked up from his homework and asked, "Mom, why do you keep smiling at that card if you never call the man who gave it to you?" Emily laughed softly. "Because I am still deciding whether the opportunity is real or whether I simply met a very kind stranger." Her son thought for a moment before answering with the simple honesty only children possess. "Sometimes kind strangers become important people." His words stayed with her throughout the weekend. Early Monday morning, after dropping him at school, Emily finally stepped outside the bookstore during her lunch break and dialed the number printed beneath Nathan's name. The call was answered before the second ring. Nathan's assistant greeted her warmly, as though she had been expecting the call. Less than an hour later, Emily found herself standing inside the elegant lobby of Carter Holdings. Marble floors reflected the afternoon sunlight pouring through towering glass walls. Employees moved confidently through the building while quiet conversations filled the spacious atrium. Emily instinctively adjusted the sleeve of her modest blue sweater, suddenly feeling out of place among polished suits and expensive briefcases. Before uncertainty could persuade her to leave, Nathan walked into the lobby himself. He was dressed in another tailored navy suit, but his welcoming smile erased the distance created by wealth and success. "Thank you for coming," he said sincerely. "I was beginning to wonder if I had imagined our conversation." Emily smiled. "I almost convinced myself not to come." Nathan nodded knowingly. That is usually what fear tells us to do. Instead of leading her into an executive boardroom, Nathan invited her to a quiet cafe inside the building where employees gathered during breaks. He ordered coffee for himself and hot tea for Emily, remembering she had chosen tea instead of coffee at the convenience store. The small detail surprised her. "You remembered," she said. Nathan smiled. "I try to remember things that matter." After several minutes of relaxed conversation, he leaned forward slightly. "I did not invite you here because of the lottery ticket," he explained. "I invited you because during 20 years in business I have interviewed hundreds of people with impressive resumes, remarkable degrees, and extraordinary recommendations. Very few of them demonstrated honesty when they believed nobody could prove the truth. You did." Emily lowered her eyes for a moment. "Honesty should not be unusual," Nathan answered quietly. "Unfortunately, it often is." He placed a neatly organized folder on the table and gently slid it toward her. Inside was not a contract, but an invitation to interview for a newly created position within Carter Holdings focused on community partnerships and charitable outreach. "There is no promise of employment," Nathan explained. "You will earn it the same way everyone else does. But I believe you deserve the opportunity to show people who you already proved yourself to be." Emily looked at the folder without opening it immediately. She realized that the greatest gift waiting in front of her had never depended on luck. It had been built entirely upon one honest decision that no amount of money could ever purchase. Emily Brooks spent the next several days preparing for the interview with the same quiet determination she had brought to every challenge life had placed before her. Each evening, after helping her son finish his homework and tucking him into bed, she sat at the small kitchen table with a borrowed notebook from the bookstore, researching community outreach programs, charitable partnerships, and the history of Carter Holdings. She was not trying to impress anyone with complicated words. She simply wanted to understand how a large company could genuinely improve the lives of ordinary families. On the morning of the interview, she chose her neatest navy blouse, carefully pressed a pair of gray slacks, and tied her light brown hair behind her shoulders. Before leaving, Her son handed her a folded piece of paper covered with colorful crayons. Across the top he had written, "My mom helps people every day." Emily smiled as she slipped the drawing into her purse beside his photograph. "Thank you," she whispered. "I think I needed this more than you know." When she arrived at Carter Holdings, she expected to spend the morning answering difficult questions from a panel of executives. Instead, Nathan Carter greeted her in the lobby with the same calm smile she had come to recognize. "The interview begins somewhere different," he said. Emily looked puzzled but followed him without hesitation. A short drive later, they arrived at a neighborhood community center supported by the Carter Foundation. Children were reading with volunteers, seniors gathered around long tables sharing lunch, and several parents waited in line at a food pantry that quietly served hundreds of families every week. Nathan said very little as they walked through the building. He simply observed how Emily naturally stopped to hold a door for an elderly woman, knelt to help a little girl gather spilled coloring pencils, and thanked every volunteer who greeted them. None of those moments were planned. None of them were part of a formal interview. They were simply reflections of who she already was. After nearly an hour, Nathan introduced Emily to the director of the center before quietly stepping aside. The director explained several challenges facing local families, including limited transportation, after-school care, and access to affordable books. Emily listened far more than she spoke. When asked what she would change first if she had unlimited funding, she surprised everyone by answering, "Before spending money, I would spend time asking families what they actually need." Sometimes people receive solutions for problems they never had while the real struggles remain invisible. The director smiled with genuine appreciation. "That may be the most practical answer I have heard in years." Nathan remained silent, but inwardly he recognized the same honesty that had first caught his attention inside the convenience store. Emily never tried to sound extraordinary. She simply answered truthfully. On the drive back to headquarters, neither of them spoke for several minutes. The silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. Finally, Nathan glanced toward her and said quietly, "Do you know why I never asked about your resume today?" Emily shook her head. Nathan smiled gently. "Because resumes describe what people have done. Character reveals what people will do next." Emily looked out the window as downtown Columbus came into view beneath the afternoon sunlight. She realized that the interview had never been about proving whether she deserved a position. It had been about discovering whether kindness could remain genuine even when nobody announced that someone important was watching. As the car stopped in front of the headquarters, Nathan turned toward her once more. "There is one more meeting tomorrow," he said. "After that, the decision will no longer belong to me alone." Emily thanked him sincerely before stepping onto the sidewalk, unaware that several executives had already spent the morning reviewing reports from everyone who had quietly witnessed the person she truly was rather than the candidate she had tried to become. The following afternoon, Emily Brooks arrived at Carter Holdings carrying nothing more than a leather folder containing her references and the quiet confidence that she had already shown the company exactly who she was. She no longer worried about saying the perfect words. She simply hoped to remain the same person. She had been inside the convenience store, inside the community center, and inside the small apartment where every decision still began with making life better for her son. The final meeting took place in a bright conference room overlooking downtown Columbus. Several senior executives welcomed her warmly before inviting her to sit at the long oak table. Nathan Carter was present, but unlike the previous conversations, he remained mostly silent. The interview belonged to the committee. One executive reviewed Emily's work history before asking, "You have never managed a corporate department. Why should we trust you with programs that represent this company across the country?" Emily smiled politely before answering, "You should not trust me because I say the right things today. You should trust me only if my actions continue matching my words tomorrow." The room became noticeably quieter. Another executive leaned forward. "What is the first quality you look for in people?" Emily thought carefully before responding. "Kindness that does not expect recognition. Anyone can be generous when someone is watching. Character appears when nobody is keeping score." Nathan lowered his eyes for a brief moment. Those words sounded remarkably familiar because they described exactly what he had witnessed days earlier without Emily realizing she was being observed. The questions continued for nearly an hour, covering budgets, nonprofit partnerships, volunteer programs, and communication with local communities. Emily answered honestly whenever she knew the solution and openly admitted whenever she needed to learn more. She never pretended to possess experience she did not have. When the meeting finally ended, the executives thanked her and asked her to wait in the lobby while they discussed their decision privately. Emily sat beside the large windows overlooking the city streets below. She watched people hurrying through crosswalks, carrying grocery bags, coffee cups, backpacks, and briefcases. Every person seemed to be traveling toward a destination that mattered. She quietly reminded herself that even if this opportunity ended today, she had already gained something unexpected. She had been reminded that honesty still had value in a world that often rewarded shortcuts. Nearly 40 minutes later, the conference room doors opened. Nathan walked toward her with a relaxed smile that immediately eased the nervousness she had tried to hide. "Thank you for waiting," he said gently. Emily stood, preparing herself for either answer. Nathan extended a neatly prepared envelope. The committee reached a unanimous decision. Emily accepted the envelope with slightly trembling hands before carefully opening it. Inside was an official employment offer welcoming her as Director of Community Partnership Initiatives for the Carter Foundation. For several seconds, she simply stared at the letter without speaking. She had expected another interview, another round of evaluations, perhaps another week of waiting. Instead, she found herself looking at an opportunity that could completely change her family's future. She finally looked up, her eyes shining with quiet gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. Nathan smiled and slowly shook his head. "Do not thank me. You earned this before either of us knew your name." Emily folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the drawing her son had given her that morning. In that moment, she understood something she would never forget. The last dollar she had spent had never purchased a scratch ticket. It had opened the first door to a future built not by luck, but by the simple courage to choose honesty when it would have been easier to choose anything else. Emily Brooks began her new position the following Monday with the same quiet humility that had carried her through every difficult season of her life. She arrived 20 minutes early carrying a modest canvas bag, a notebook, and the determination to learn every name she encountered before the end of the week. The employees who welcomed her expected someone eager to impress executives. Instead, they found a woman who greeted receptionists with the same warmth she offered department directors, thanked the maintenance staff for preparing the meeting rooms, and stopped each morning to ask the security guards how their families were doing. Those small moments spread through the building faster than any formal announcement. Before long, people who had never met Emily began recognizing her not because of her job title, but because of the kindness she carried into ordinary conversations. During her second week, Emily visited several neighborhoods where the Carter Foundation supported local organizations. Rather than arriving with prepared speeches, she spent hours listening to teachers, volunteers, parents, and community leaders. She filled pages of her notebook with ideas, concerns, and simple observations. One principal explained that many children struggled because they did not have enough books at home. A food pantry coordinator described families who quietly skipped meals so their children could eat. An elderly volunteer smiled as she told Emily, "Sometimes people only need someone willing to listen before they are ready to accept help." Emily returned to headquarters carrying no dramatic proposal, only a practical plan built from the voices of the people she had met. When she presented her recommendations to the executive committee, she spoke calmly and directly. Instead of suggesting expensive publicity campaigns, she proposed expanding mobile library programs, supporting neighborhood food partnerships, and creating volunteer networks led by local residents instead of outside consultants. The room remained silent until one executive finally smiled and said, "For the first time in years, I feel like I understand the people behind our reports." Nathan Carter watched quietly from the end of the table. He realized Emily had done something many experienced professionals had failed to accomplish. She had transformed statistics into human stories without exaggeration or emotion for its own sake. She simply reminded everyone that every number represented a family waiting to be seen. Several weeks later, Nathan visited the same community center where he had first observed Emily during her interview. Children were laughing in a newly expanded reading room filled with colorful shelves donated through the Foundation's latest initiative. Parents gathered nearby, while volunteers organized evening tutoring sessions. The director welcomed Nathan with a grateful smile. Attendance has nearly doubled, she said. Families tell us they finally feel like someone asked what they actually needed. Nathan looked across the room and saw Emily kneeling beside a little boy as she helped him sound out the words on the first page of a library book. She did not notice that anyone was watching. She was completely focused on encouraging the child to read the next sentence by himself. Nathan smiled quietly because nothing about her had changed. The office, the title, and the responsibility had become larger, but her heart had remained exactly the same. As he prepared to leave, the director handed him a framed photograph taken during the opening of the new reading room. In the center stood Emily surrounded by smiling children holding books above their heads. Across the bottom of the frame was a handwritten message from one of the volunteers. It read, "Real change begins when someone chooses people before recognition." Nathan looked at the words for a long moment before carefully carrying the photograph back to his office, knowing that the greatest investment his company had ever made had never appeared on a financial report. Nearly 1 year later, the convenience store looked exactly the same. The coffee still filled the air with its familiar aroma. The lottery machine still stood quietly beside the counter. Rain tapped gently against the windows once again, almost as if the seasons had decided to recreate the evening when two strangers had first crossed paths because of a single dollar. Emily Brooks stepped inside carrying a small donation box filled with children's books collected through the Carter Foundation's newest reading campaign. The cashier recognized her immediately and smiled. "I was wondering when you would come back," he said warmly. Emily laughed softly. "Life became a little busier than I expected." Before either of them could say another word, the entrance door opened again. Nathan Carter walked inside wearing a simple jacket instead of a business suit. He had come without an assistant, without a driver, and without anyone announcing his arrival. For a brief second, they simply looked at one another before sharing the kind of smile that only people connected by an unforgettable memory could understand. "It seems this place keeps bringing us back," Nathan said. Emily glanced toward the lottery machine and nodded. "Maybe some stories know exactly where they belong." The cashier reached beneath the counter and carefully removed a small picture frame. Inside was a copy of the security camera image from the evening they had first met. The original recording had eventually been erased, but before it disappeared forever, the manager had printed one single frame showing the untouched scratched ticket resting between them. Beneath the photograph, someone had typed a simple sentence. "Honesty changed the ending." Nathan studied the picture quietly before smiling. "That belongs on the wall." The cashier nodded. "It already has a place reserved." As they talked, several neighborhood children entered the store after school, laughing as they hurried toward the snack aisle. One little boy recognized Emily and ran over with an excited smile. "Miss Brooks," he said proudly, "I finished every book from the reading challenge." Emily congratulated him and handed him a new novel from the donation box. Nathan watched the exchange without interrupting. Once again, she was helping someone without realizing anyone important might be watching. Outside, the rain slowly began to fade as sunlight broke through the clouds, filling the parking lot with soft golden reflections. Nathan looked toward Emily and spoke quietly. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had spent that last dollar on something else?" Emily thought for a long moment before answering. "Sometimes. But then I remember it was never really about the dollar." She smiled gently as she looked toward the children reading the covers of their new books. It was about every choice that came after it. Nathan nodded. The ticket was never scratched. Emily looked at him with quiet curiosity. "No," he continued, reaching into his wallet and unfolding the same untouched lottery ticket that had remained safely preserved all this time. "I kept it exactly as it was." He placed it inside the picture frame beneath the printed photograph, because the greatest prize was never hidden under the silver coating. The cashier carefully closed the frame and hung it beside the lottery machine where every customer could see it before walking away. No jackpot amount appeared beside it. No winning numbers were displayed. Only one ordinary ticket, one unforgettable photograph, and one simple reminder that kindness can create opportunities that luck never could. As Emily and Nathan stepped back into the clearing afternoon together, neither of them spoke for several moments. They did not need to. Some stories end with fortunes, others end with fame. The rarest stories end with people becoming better than they were when the first page began. And somewhere inside a small neighborhood convenience store in Columbus, Ohio, One forgotten dollar quietly continued changing lives long after everyone stopped counting its value.